GM. Okay, so for this episode numero tres, and yes, I know I did not pronounce that phonetically correct. Um, we had Benchmarc on, and for those who don't know, Benchmarc, his Twitter handle is bench, as in the thing you sit on and you find at a park, and then Mark, Marcc. We'll drop links, in the descriptions and whatever of the videos. But Benchmarc is the co-founder of Studio TBD. And that's Studio TBD is a cannabis company that creates cannabis products, but has a tie-in through NFTs by not only having a portfolio of some NFTs, but also they have a membership token to their product. So really interesting OGMFer guy, has been around since, I think the mint, is what he said in the episode. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, man, you hadn't really had much discourse with him. So give me your first take. And then we'll dive into mine.
Yeah, totally. No, I'm super excited for this episode. I mean, first of all, Benchmarc is a cowboy motherfucker, which obviously instant OG status. Just have to say that. And then just generally, like what I really enjoyed about the conversation was his level of business experience, business acumen. He has in his personal experience, he was a hedge fund trader. So I just thought it was really cool just to hear his take on NFTs, Web3, and how he's applying it to his cannabis company. But yeah, I really didn't know Benchmarc before. But yeah, what about you, Breezy? What are your thoughts?
So in this kind of vein of the Accidental OG podcast, one of the things I love doing and I'm excited to bring to people is talking to like the owner operators of companies in the NFT space. The emphasis being on operator as opposed to the speculator collector types. There's interesting people on both sides, but I'm finding this thing from the Santana episode and now from Benchmarc. It's like the perspectives we're getting from the business owners and operators is just so crystallized and like unique and very insightful. And it's different than what you hear people talking about on Twitter spaces, right? And these are the same people hanging out in those Twitter spaces. They might not be giving their opinions, but they just have like these richer responses and views on things, in my opinion. And so, yeah, Benchmarc did not disappoint. We talked a lot about his background and his venture and less about, I think, the culture and just crypto at large. But he, hopefully maybe have him on in the future as they're rolling out new products. But, he just has a wealth of knowledge about being an entrepreneur and is, I would say a successful person in his own right. And yeah, just an interesting mind to talk to. I mean, it's a great guy. I'm excited for everybody to listen. Hopefully they see what I see in Studio TBD, which is like a company taking a super basic, obvious approach to NFTs. And it's like people just using the technology. Everybody talks about, oh yeah, NFTs are an obvious, awesome technology, but nobody uses it that way, right? Like, at least not yet at scale. So see somebody using it in these like obvious ways, super cool, super cool.
Sick. With that said, we'll see in episode 3 why Benchmarc is an accidental OG. Benchmarc, thank you for joining us. We're excited to chat with you. One of the reasons I asked KML to have you on the show was because I felt like, I've been following your project for a long time. And it's just, something that's interesting to me because we'll get into it, but I think you guys are doing something like obvious that I haven't seen a lot of other like e-commerce brands or entrepreneurs, what have you, do. And so with all that being said, before
we jump too far ahead of ourselves, would you mind just letting everybody in on who you are, your background, how you got into crypto, stuff like that?
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys. Super fun. Yeah, so I'm actually from Sweden, Stockholm originally. Moved to the U.S. back in '08. Was in the hedge fund industry for for my whole, what you're going to call a career, I'd say. Started in finance early on, so I was working back office, when I was 19, and this was like 2005. So it's definitely a while ago, and it's funny too because now we're having a little mini banking crisis. And when I moved to the US, it was '08, summer of '08. So it was like full blown crisis mode at the time. Bear Stearns, Merrill, Lehman, all of that. So this is a real deja vu moment. And it's interesting too, because it kind of ties back to like why I'm so excited about crypto and why we're so excited about crypto too. I have pretty good knowledge about the infrastructure and finance, just because our firm, so just to give you guys some background, the firm I worked with was one of the original kind of flash boys high frequency shops. So we were trading dual listed ADRs, US to Europe, and then US to Asia back in the day. So when I joined the firm, and so I was, like I said, I was working at a brokerage firm first, started that in '05, did back office, was at the trading floor, was at the research floor, did everything I could. And then when I joined this hedge fund, I was actually brought on to kind of explore the ETF market. So the ETF market was just kind of getting started. It was super nascent, and the international ETFs, and it's especially, were kind of they were kind of like the progression almost from ADRs. And I don't know if you guys are too familiar with ADRs, but it's basically the American listing of a lot of European and Asian companies. So it started really, for the firm, it started with the .com, because Ericsson and Nokia and these companies were trading a lot during the .coms, and then they would keep on trading them overnight in the U.S. Right. So the firm came from that kind of background, and I joined, like I said, to explore the ETF market, and we were one of the biggest liquidity providers in international ETFs. So EM, EFA, EWJ, all the kind of EWY, all the ones that are like really, really big funds and big trading vehicles right now. We were one of the pioneers to start making markets in those. And it was obviously a crazy time too, right? So we got a really good idea about, how these different marketplaces works, how the real plumbing of the financial system works. We worked a lot with, co-location, setting up servers at the exchanges. And back then, it was not a thing really. So it was interesting because this was before the whole arms race of high frequency started. And so that's just to give you guys a little bit of a background about the idea of it. And so when crypto came along, I was just totally blown away by the idea that there was a global instant settlement layer infrastructure that anybody could tap into. Because if you come from finance, and a lot of people in the U.S. don't even realize this, because U.S. is such a great capital markets, but it's super fragmented. If you want to trade another region, you have to set up local accounts, local prime brokerage. In Europe, it's, there's a bunch of different exchanges. Every country has their own exchange, right? So it's like a real patchwork. And then within every country too, the stack is really complicated. There's there's deposit settlement layers, there are brokerages, there are ECNs, there are exchanges, there's all these different layers to it. And crypto just simplifies that so much with one settlement layer, like anyone can access it. It's instant settlement, it's global. So that was one of the first things when I saw the AMMs come on board too. It's like, wow, this is really a big game changer for global finance, because obviously anybody can list a token and anyone can participate. And with the AMMs, even though, there's a lot of discussions about kind of capital efficiency and stuff like that, what's really cool with AMMs is they never go down, right? It's continuous pricing. They're always trading. I mean, I think Uniswap had one of the biggest days ever just 2 days ago, right? And they did like 5% of the NASDAQ. So, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's really, really interesting. And that's not to say that the global capital markets in TradFi are impressive. I think they are, but I think, crypto is like definitely the future.
Do you remember like where you were when you found out about crypto? Like the exact moment
Yeah,
and all that?
you know what, I do, because it was COVID, beginning of COVID, like 2020 was a pretty crazy year because I was in cannabis already. So I had left finance to be in cannabis, and we started making edibles on the East Coast. I was based in Miami, Fort Lauderdale at the time. So we started making edibles, and just as kind of like a garage project. And this was 2017. And it kind of took off a little bit. Just to give you some background, the firm I was at, they were so wildly successful during the financial crisis that the founders kind of started checking out a little bit. They were much older than me. So it was a period in time for me to kind of look what I wanted to do elsewhere. And I was either debating, going even further into finance, maybe setting my own fund up and stuff like that. But I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And when cannabis came around and I started, going down the rabbit hole of cannabis, I was just like, wow, this is really, really amazing. And it's a global opportunity as well, where the US is taking lead and everybody in the world consumes cannabis. So I was just like excited about kind of like that it was going to be, a multi-decade kind of growth opportunity in cannabis. And long story short, started making edibles, and and we had some early success with that. And so I moved out to California, and I made an investment in a manufacturing company. And then I don't know how familiar you guys are with the cannabis rollout in California, but it was a pretty bumpy ride. There was a lot of unforeseen kind of hiccups that happened around that time, 2018, 2019. We were actually getting ready to launch the first time right before COVID happened. So we were, we had a bunch of stores that were ready. We were going to do a bunch of events at Coachella. It was a really big apparatus that was about to unfold right before COVID happened. So when COVID happened in March, all those plans got canceled. We were going to do a very kind of event driven and physical launch, very grassroots, right? So that plan was just like the absolute opposite of what was possible, given what was going on with COVID. So I was so focused on cannabis and was so kind of in like tunnel vision with it, and there was so much fires to put it out and everything. So I missed that first part, of kind of like the big upswing that happened for crypto in 2020. And I had been dabbling a little bit with Bitcoin years before that. So like when Bitcoin first, when they launched the CME future, we used to make markets on the CME future for Bitcoin and stuff like that. But that was like, I guess, 2017 or something. But then at the end of 2020, things started to settle down. We'd put out some fires. The company that I'd invested in, the manufacturing company, they had gotten operational. So we'd started getting some positive, some positive momentum. And that's when I spoke to a good friend of mine in Sweden. And the crazy story was that he was like, yo, you gotta check out this thing called Sushi Swap. And one of his buddies that he's been working with for a long time was actually the CTO or COO for Sushi Swap during a very brief period of time. Yeah. And it was like so crazy, right? And he told me
Yeah.
about the whole vampire attack and everything that was going on. And I'd never heard about Sushi Swap. I'd never heard about Uniswap. I'd barely heard about Ethereum. I'd never heard about an AMM. And I was just like, I was completely mind blown. So that was right at the tail end of 2020. And I was like all in right away. I was like, well, how can I get involved? What should I do? And it was funny because since we had packed up the first launch in cannabis and you kind of like, put out all the fires that were existing with that, there was an opportunity to relaunch, right? So the timing was actually perfect. And that's also when I met my partner, Robert, that you guys know, Lundy. So we started chatting right after New Year's, and we started talking about cannabis, but very, very quickly the conversation started happening about crypto as well. And then all of a sudden, we heard about the punks, and we were like, shit, the punks are really dope. Like, that's a cool thing. And then the apes came out, and it was like, oh my God, what's going on here, right? So yeah, that was the moment. I was like Q1 2021, I would say, when we really, really we went down the rabbit hole.
Okay, wow. I've got so many things to unwrap.
Yeah,
but
sure.
let's back up really quickly. So you guys in 2017, you start tinkering with edibles and cannabis. You get all the way up into an actual launch. What was the name of this project? Can you tell us what the name of this project was? Like, how did you guys raise outside funding for this? Like, it sounds like, you guys were, this was a multi-year thing.
Yeah, it was kind of like, it started as purely doing edibles. That's how we started out. And the kind of the idea was always that we wanted to do beverages. So I got involved in cannabis really to do beverages. That's when it clicked to me like, okay, this is going to be massive, because why wouldn't people want to drink weed, right? Just as you drink beer or whatever. So the idea was always that we wanted to do beverages. And then kind of like one of the problems that happened when we came out to California was that there was no capacity really to do beverages. So we invested in the factory that I told you about. It took way longer to get them up and running than we thought initially. I made that investment in 2018. They ended up going operational in late 2020. So, 2.5 years almost. So it was quite a long time. During that time, we were still, manufacturing edibles on our own. We had a commercial kitchen where we made edibles, and we used to sell them a little bit everywhere. We kind of had a small fan base. The project back then was called Frassers. That's what it was called. And the idea was kind of next generation Jamaica was like the idea. Frost in Jamaican is about being high, basically, right? So that was the concept back then. And I put, we were self-funded up to a point. I put a lot of money into that as well. And then we did raise outside funding as well. So, and we built a pretty big team going into COVID, right? So we had gained a lot of momentum and a lot of things were about to happen. And then COVID it just like we had to pivot, and we had to kind of, rethink the whole rollout.
So did you end up rolling all of those investors and that whole team into the next project, which was Studio TBD, or did you have to wind down that
No,
first project completely?
yeah, we had to wind it down, but the core, I would say the rest of the team actually went forward with the project. So at the time, we launched it as a CBD beverage because we felt that the distribution was better for it, and
Mhm.
there was less red tape. And California cannabis wasn't really where we thought it would be at the time. So, a big part of it was that there was a lot of partners and people involved in partnerships that were set up for that. So really what happened was that we ended up winding down the company, but moving all the investors to a new company. And then the team, a big part of the team went forward with that brand. And I ended up stepping down and then relaunching with Studio TBD.
Got it. Got it. Okay. That makes sense. Um,
Yeah,
okay. So then you meet your new partner um, in 2021, did you say?
yeah,
Is it January
yeah.
2021?
January
Okay. And
21.
then
Yeah.
you guys start talking about NFTs, and it sounds like it just kind of naturally fused together. Like, oh, here's this opportunity, that I've been working on, and here's this new, like, kind of primitive way to start it, right? This new launchpad type stuff. I'll
Right.
maybe let you get into that. And so it just clicked immediately, is what it sounds like some eureka moment.
It definitely was. It was also that, cannabis and crypto is just such a natural fit too. It's like the
Mm,
same type of culture in a lot of ways, right? It's been fringe, it's been viewed as semi-illegal or illegal, right? And a lot of the early use cases for crypto were related to cannabis and other drugs as well. So it was kind of forward leaning, it was like freedom of choice, anti-establishment. So we felt like from a cultural standpoint, first of all, it was just like, well, it's obvious, right? Like, why don't we just, tap into crypto and see what we can do with crypto, because that makes a lot of sense. But then the NFTs, we felt also was kind of like the cultural part of crypto that was everything before that was very finance focused.
yeah.
So it was obviously DeFi, and then Bitcoin was kind of like supposed to be cash or gold, right? And with NFTs, you started to get that creative layer and the cultural layer to it. So that's why we were blown away by the punks. And then I think the success of the apes, to us, it really just proved the concept more of the technology and of the infrastructure than anything else. Like, oh, if they can be that successful, it just kind of proves how strong the actual tooling is. And
Right.
then we felt like, because we were, I think we came at it from two different angles, me and Robert. From his standpoint, it was a lot about like, okay, there's a content opportunity, because we always talked about like, we want to do a lot of content, we want to tell a lot of stories. And then it was like, okay, there's an amazing content opportunity with NFTs to kind of intertwine these things, right? And then from my standpoint, I was always a big fan of innovative loyalty programs. I was always a big fan of Amex as a business. It was something that I'd followed a long time and thought like, in Starbucks too, everybody talks about Starbucks, right? And that was something too that I'd followed for a long time. Like, if you have a really strong loyalty program, and you can do it in a creative way, that would be one of the coolest things. But, setting up your own loyalty program when you're a small brand is kind of like, it doesn't really work. It's not that strong usually, right? Unless you do something really
Right.
creative. And then we saw that, here you actually just can tap into the infrastructure that already exists. And then also the creative layer with content is like, it's perfect, right? So yeah, that definitely was like, yeah, this is like, we have to do this.
Okay, again, so much shit to go into. I love that you say loyalty program. My background's in credit cards. That was like my first startup that I
Okay.
joined out of college. So obviously, like a lot of study and like Amex loyalty programs and stuff. I think that's
Nice.
a cool point. The other thing is I want to quickly touch on two things. One is I want you to tell us what Studio TBD is, because at this point everybody's probably wondering. And two,
Yeah.
I want to get into like how you chose your route when you came across NFTs, because like you come up to NFTs, it's this really cool primitive, but it must have been daunting. Like, which way do we go, right? So maybe you could start with telling us what Studio TBD is and blend that in if it's possible.
Yeah. So Studio TBD, the way we talk about it is that it's a creative collective, right? So we are a company and a creative collective, and we focus on cannabis and Web3. So right now, at the moment, we have two different lines of cannabis products. We make cannabis infused beverages in California, and then we also make hemp derived THC edibles. And those are the ones that we can do e-commerce with. They're out of New Jersey, and we operate in New York, New Jersey, and Texas with the hemp derived edibles, and then with the cannabis beverages, it's in California. And then on the Web3 and crypto side, obviously we have the NFT membership program, right? And that's our first initiative into Web3 and crypto. We have a lot of plans of doing more things, and there's a lot of exciting stuff that's going to be coming out just in the next couple of weeks, actually, that we can chat about then. But yeah, at the moment it's the NFT membership program, and to talk a little bit about how we chose a certain path, we felt that the space is obviously, like, in general, moving very, very fast, right? So as soon as someone does something, then everybody has to do the same thing, right? And it's like it's daunting from that perspective, obviously, if you want to catch that exact wave. So for us, we felt like, you know what, we're not going to be able to be quicker than everybody else or be on the latest thing all the time, because it's going to be changing a lot. And so we have our core thesis about, what's going to happen in crypto, where crypto is valuable or not, where the tooling, like what makes it great, right? And we put that into the white paper that was called Launchpad 2.0. And for us, it was, we chose Ethereum just because it was the biggest chain, right? It was where there was most liquidity, and that was the strongest brand name at the time and still is. And we chose it to do it as a membership token to start out with, not as a PFP, because we felt like we wanted to go the organic route, and we wanted to kind of build it over phases. So the membership program is going to evolve over time into a PFP. If you have the membership token, it's a mint pass as well. And at the absolute base layer of everything, it gives you 50% off on the web store. So the next iteration of the web store will be, token gated. All that functionality will be built in right to the website, and you'll just be able to connect with your wallet and get the discounts. And the idea really is that this membership token program is almost like the enterprise level of everything we do, where it's like you get wholesale pricing, and you're going to get everything before everyone else as well. And then there's a lot of perks and stuff around that. And we felt like, to keep it really simple, not to kind of, do two things at once, just kind of enter the market and say that, what, this token, we take it very, very seriously, that it's a reliable token, and the value really is around that it's a membership and you get this utility, right? And that's kind of like the base layer of it. And then we'll build on that over time.
You kind of briefly mentioned the membership token and the idea of like loyalty and rewards. And one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is just around the retention problem in NFTs. I think a lot of projects have kind of really been able to succeed at creating that initial hype, minting out, and then sustaining for maybe 6 months at most for a lot of projects. What's kind of your perspective on that in terms of like loyalty, membership, and do you think there are kind of things that the NFT space can learn from Web 2 that you think can be applied and plan to apply to this idea of like Studio TBD?
You know what? I think that I'm not like a Web 2 social media expert in any way, shape, or form. I'm not a marketing or brand guy either. So a lot of these things are, really Robert's field, but I am very interested in them, and it's a big passion for me. So like, I would say this first of all, that a lot of what you see happening in the NFT space with projects, because of the exact phenomenon that you're talking about, it has to create hype, it has to mint out, because otherwise people feel that there's no liquidity and there's no point to be involved. And you have to kind of create that momentum, right? So if you're in that camp, and I totally understand if you are, the problem you get to is kind of similar to a lot of problems that you get when launching a brand or launching a product, is that what are you managing for, right? So a lot of these projects, and I see this a lot, is they're managing for the community, right? So it's about keeping the community happy, and they're like always behind, right? And then if it gets better, they actually end up being more behind and more problems come up. So I think you can do that. That's definitely not what we want to do, where we create a community first and then launch the product. I think also it comes down to like, it's competitive enough to make good products and hard enough, and we have a thesis and a POV for our product. So from our standpoint, it's like right now we're maybe in, say, 100 stores or so, right, in 4 different states. And for us, it's like the membership token has value if people want to buy the product. If people are not interested in buying the product and the product doesn't have value, then the token doesn't have value either. So like, you can create this big community, but then everybody's asking like, okay, so what are you going to do with the community? Are you going to launch a product? You going to launch a service? And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I mean, I see a lot what we call kind of like bridges to nowhere, where it's like they just do more things for the community, but it really doesn't lead to anything that really is value creative in my standpoint from a traditional sense. So when we look at the great companies of the world and the great brands, they've launched in a very grassroots way. I think that the like we grew up. We're from Europe, so we grew up on the era of Red Bull. Where Red Bull was running around in the streets, handing out cans, doing snowboard events in the '90s, and really built their kind of core community base around the product and the experience. So for us, that's what we want to do, because we feel it's that type of product and it's that type of opportunity. And then we want to, and what we happen, and we already see happen naturally, is that, then people start figuring out and they start finding out about the digital aspect of what we're doing. They're like, oh, you guys are on Web3, you guys have a token, interesting. You guys are on Twitter, okay, let me follow you guys on Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. So we see a natural spillover from retail to e-commerce. And we feel that that's the right way to go for us, because it's just like, I think it's going to be a more sustainable base over time.
I love that. I think you dropped a lot of great gems just like right there in terms of this idea of, trying to please the community at all times will lead to building a bunch of bridges to nowhere. I think that's just so accurate. I guess with that said, like, I am curious, just with your TradFi background, have you seen any kind of like similarities with the NFT space and TradFi, and where do you see kind of like key differences, or how has that experience kind of like impacted your perspective on the NFT space?
That's a good question. Well, in a lot of ways, we used to avoid when I was at the the fund I was at. We only traded hyper liquid stuff, right? So we were a high frequency shop. We traded a lot. We did a lot of volume. We were trying to capture small spreads and arbitrage that were, sometimes at the longest maybe a day or two, right? So what we would do a lot was close in the U.S. to kind of open in Asia or open in like basically like the gaps in the marketplace. Like anytime a market is closed, like those gaps were what we capitalized on a lot. And that's because you have a lot of flows that end, like end of the day flows, opening flows, and a lot of information that just happens either right before the market opens or right after the market closes a lot, right? Because they don't want information to decimate while the market is open. Um, Funny with crypto, right? Everything is open 24/7. You can launch you can launch a shitty coin that is like so illiquid and super small, right? So like I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of which is amazing and really cool, but also obviously there's a lot of challenges with that. So I think with the NFTs, and that's why people talk about liquidity so much, because it's like, oh shit, like if the coin is not liquid, then I can't trade it, and then it's like I don't want to be involved, right? When you trade startups, a lot of startups are very illiquid, right? You invest in something, it might take years before you see liquidity. In a lot of private businesses, that's how it is as well, right? So you have this interesting phenomenon where NFTs are, like startups that, in a lot of cases, right? I'm not saying not in the case maybe with MFers, but in a lot of these traditional cases with the Yuga Labs and the Zukis of the world, right? You have basically like a startup, and in some cases, pre-product startups that are trading are publicly traded, basically, right? And I think it opens up so many different opportunities and problems. And I think the biggest one obviously is around communication. So what we talk a lot about a lot is finding and developing a good communication cadence where you don't end up being a slave to the marketplace, but you instead dictate the terms of when and how you communicate. I think that's really important. I think it's also really hard.
So, with that being said, um, certainly you wouldn't characterize your tokens as like startup equity or anything like that, right?
I wouldn't say startup equity, but I would say that it is like the way I look at it, just as a very simple way is like, if we sell product for say, if we sell product for $100,000 in a month, then our retailers, they sell that product for like $300,000 that month, right? So for us, it's about the ecosystem opportunity that the products create. And the NFT being that you get 50% off, well, the more people that like the product, the more people that purchase the product on a regular basis, you know, the value that gives the value token, that gives the token value, right? Without it being equity necessarily. So I think that there are mechanisms that you could, create within the ecosystem that necessarily doesn't make it a security, but you can participate and you can help, the brand grow. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and that's kind of what I was hitting on earlier when I said that you guys are doing something obvious, right? It's this concept of giving your holders half off of your actual product that
Yeah.
to me is like so blatantly obvious, something that you would do with an NFT, and that like other people aren't doing it. Like, why do you think people aren't doing this? Because this would, I think, circumvent all of the issues with the allegations that this could be like a security.
I think you're right. And for us, like I said, like it's a membership token. There's utility in the membership token, right? And we're all as kind of a community and a group or an extended team. Um, the more product we purchase, the more product we refer to other people. That obviously, cements the value. I wouldn't say that necessarily increases the value over time, but it definitely cements the core value of the token, right? And then since it is, can become a liquid token as well, then there's liquidity as well. So I think that makes sense. And also, we don't have an elaborate roadmap for people to dive into to say, oh shit, I'm going to buy this token because they're going to go to Mars or something like that. So for us, it's like, it's very simple. This is what it is, and you get half off, right? Pure, very simple. To the question why other people aren't doing it that way, I think it, it comes down to that. Like I said, like earlier, like the tooling and the infrastructure is so great to do digital stuff. And then you have social media like Twitter, or like Discord, Instagram, and so on, where you can create so much perceived value so quick that like it's almost like I joke about this too. Like, finance is one of those things where it's such a powerful incentive mechanism that you can kind of lose track of what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? So like a lot of projects, I think like it's just so easy to do that. And if you're a project that really has a product, you're so focused on the problems with the product and growing the product that like, why would you venture into Web3 and take that risk if you don't fully believe in believe in the future and the vision of it, right? You really see the opportunity. So I think a lot of, there's a lot of brands right now that had NFT programs they were going to roll out, they took it back, they didn't want to risk it. I think there is a risk, obviously, with launching a token. There definitely is, and that's why we said that we're going to take it step by step and not do anything too crazy and kind of build the momentum to really get into the next phase of it. But yeah, I think there's multiple reasons why people don't do it. I think it's much easier to it's much easier to do something online, create some hype, launch a token, talk about what you're going to do, and you can make a lot of money doing that, right? But making actual product, manufacturing, recalls, dealing with distributors, dealing with retailers, finding product market fit for an actual product is, fairly hard. That's what, companies struggle with every day.
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of good points, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, where it's like most NFT projects are startups that are pre-product. They just raise like a big angel round, and then they're trying to figure it out after the fact. And I think you're right in terms of like there is higher risk for like companies that are already established into venturing into like this new technology. But I'm glad to see companies like Starbucks kind of like dip their toe. I guess like with all that said though, I'm curious, Benchmark, what in particular kind of like attracted you to MFers, like of like all the NFTs, and what was kind of the spark there? I'm curious, since that's how we all connected.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we love the MFers. So like we minted MFers the day after mint, and we were at the airport. We had just landed in Miami for Art Basel. And I think it was I to be honest, at the time I didn't know who Satoshi was. So I was like, I saw the MFers, and then I quickly did a little research on Satoshi. And to me, it was like, okay, this is like what the punks should have been, right? That was my initial feeling. And that's how me and Robert talked about it early on. It was like, this is this is the Web3 ethos. It has all the crypto ethos involved. It's a meme. It's a meme that everybody knows about. Um, it is, it's like it really became. First of all, we were talking about almost like the Bitcoin of NFTs, and now I feel more like it's like the Ethereum of NFT almost, just because of this decentralized community and team that's been building around it, just like what you guys are doing right now. So I think like for us it was just like, okay, this is what the punks should have been, and then when Satoshi, um, when like that was the whole thing of it too. Like it was like leaderless, it was teamless, it was decentralized in a cultural way, not in a technical way. And that's the thing too. Like there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of confusion and purism going on in crypto where it's like this is what decentralization means or this is what this means. And I think a lot of that is like to be found out and to be determined. I don't think it's necessarily like very, very clear cut to this day. And I think the purists, there's a lot of purists in cannabis too, and I think a lot of the purists will eventually have a hard time operating in this like hybrid world that's emerging for crypto and for cannabis too. So like yeah, I guess for us it was just like I was just I just love the fact that there was like no team, and that everybody that we came across in the MFers community was super cool and like down to earth, smart people, creative people, finance people, all types of people as well, right? And we went to that event and NFT NYC. I think that really cemented it for us too, because it was just like, I mean, we went to some other events, like, and it was just the MFR event was just like the coolest. That was just the fact of it. You know what I mean? It was super laid back. People were nice, and yeah, it just represented everything that we felt like was great about crypto.
Nice. I love that. And I love that one point that you made. And I want to make sure I actually like captured it correctly. You kind of mentioned this idea of like decentralized technologically, but not decentralized like socially. Is that what you said?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think like, there, for instance, like for us, we're kind of like a hybrid, right? We have a company, obviously the company is, a US incorporated company, but then we have an NFT. Um, we think that there's a lot of things that can be decentralized in what we do and that can be characterized as decentralized. But then there are also things that are centralized. Obviously, like there's a central team where people are on the payroll and there's certain people that make decisions for certain things. And we think that's important too. Like, I think these like purists idea about that everything becomes self-governing and it's like this perfect machine that kind of just fixes itself. I think that's a little bit naive. I think sometimes you need core individuals that kind of make decisions, and that could be cool. And then, but in the case with MFers, I think it's just like it's just a fantastic experiment. And then, I think it was, I can't remember who it was that just posted that picture of like all the different projects that are going on in the MFer space. I think it was like a week ago or so. And just looking at that, I think it dawned on me what we always talked about, how kind of like it's a decentralized team. Like the community is a decentralized team, and there's not necessarily one point or one key figure that is holding it together. There are some core individuals, obviously, that are more involved than others, and there are going to be projects that are more prominent than others in the MFers community. But really, it's like this decentralized team, and that's really the strongest thing that exists.
I love that. Breezy, do you have any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts, a lot of.
Dude, Benchmarc, by the way, yeah, a lot of gems, a lot of insights. I'm really
Yeah,
enjoying this conversation.
some good clip ups or some good snippets we're
Yeah,
gonna have. Yeah,
bangers.
you make a lot of good points and things that I've been thinking about a lot, and I know KML, I've like probably beat these horses dead. Like one of them is you talk about this community when like the team's decentralized. I've been like operating off this mental model that like MFers isn't a community, it's a commune, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
communities are more like what you're building, where there is like a central
Mm-hmm.
team, right? Because communities have like people like leaders, like they wouldn't
Yeah.
work without the community leaders, the city council or whatever. Communes
Right.
is
Right.
more
Right.
like what we have, and I
Right.
think that like there's like it. I think you like articulated it really well using like the nomenclature that people are using, right? Um, because I start to like invent my own words and terms and stuff, and that tends to like not land very well. But yeah, so I don't know. I find that fascinating. I think you sound like a lot of the other OGs in the MFR community are just like operating in like our kind of small sector of the internet, with respect to how you came across MFers and how it like just clicked really quickly, and you saw how it could work across the other projects and stuff. So there's a NFT portion to Studio TBD's operations, right? Like you guys own a small portfolio of NFTs. Um,
Yeah.
what's the thinking like behind that? I mean, I think I know, but could you tell us like what do you guys plan to do with that? How do you guys make acquisition decisions, etc.?
Yeah. So it's really the lens of both me and Robert's kind of intersection in the Venn diagram. So I I view things a little bit more from a technical standpoint, um, and want to see there's certain just like I want to see what feels organic about it. Like, so I've done some startup investing. I've obviously invested. I used to invest in a lot of consumer companies back at the fund too. I probably invested in like over 150 consumer companies, and there's just certain aspects of like what we want to see together. And then Robert comes from more like the brand and the creative side. And really it's not, well, it is about obviously making, um good acquisitions, right? But it's also about, connecting with other communities, this like this idea that you can do like permissionless collabs basically, right? So like we were hoping that there were going to be more projects like the MFers, and we thought that there was going to be like maybe a lot of them, or we thought at least that there would be maybe a little bit more different types of projects. That didn't really end up happening because the cycle was so short and everybody focused on doing like ape derivatives or something. But it's what we plan on doing with it long term is really like for us, it's like we are DCAing into MFers, and that's like that's like the main thing for us now because that's the only project we're really interested in. And then we look at different kind of membership tokens and stuff like that because we want to keep tabs on different communities, what they're talking about, what investments they're making, how they're thinking. I like to be in different group chats just to kind of see what people are talking about and see kind of what the sentiment is towards things. But at the core of us, it's really come down to like, we want to buy more MFers. We want to support in a lot of different ways, and then we have, we're going to do, we're going to incorporate MFers more and more into what we do as an NFT project as well over time. And there's a lot of stuff with that that's going to be coming out in a few weeks or so that we can chat about then.
Go ahead. Tell us about what's happening. Drop some alpha for us.
Yeah, well, I can say that, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think we want to talk about it more as it unfolds. But the MFers is basically like, the MFers is a key cornerstone in what we want to do creatively. So just as these conversations have been going on a lot around the treasury, right? Like doing stuff and getting the treasury involved and all that stuff. And we're in the camp obviously that it's like that stuff is very complicated, and we just feel like, let's go out and do dope things where we feel like the MFers have a natural fit. So that's kind of like all I really can say about it. But we're looking at different avenues where we feel like the MFers can get broader awareness around it. We can tap into kind of like the normal world, so to speak. And people love MFers. That's the thing too. So I think that it's just about doing dope shit, and the rest will kind of take care of itself.
So you talk about involving MFers. Just let's be clear here. Are you talking about bringing your product to the community or bringing MFers to like the real world via your product?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there an order to that? I mean, I feel like you've already started by bringing your product just to the world, and obviously you're in the MFer community, but like from a more mechanical standpoint, how do are you just gonna like show us some really good gummies with like an MFR on the package and we're all gonna buy it? I'm interested. Like, what's the thought process? How do you convince?
I would buy that, by the way.
Well, okay, so full disclosure,
I would 100%
I've already
buy that. Yeah.
Benchmarc knows, like I've already bought like a shit ton of TBD. I've given away to like all my friends and family. My buddy actually, his first NFT ever was a TBD token, a TBD Studio token.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
and
Advocate.
he bought it because he fucking liked the gummies so much, and he just ordered like 7 of them the other day. Yeah. And so
nice.
I already know
Appreciate
that like
that,
people
man.
love this thing. Yeah, I've been spreading it around and people love it. Everybody tells me like, yeah, this thing is sick. So I'm just like, I instead of shoving it down people's throats, like, what do we do? How do I help you? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think, there's, like I said, like there's a lot of stuff coming out that will definitely crystallize how to get involved in different ways. But like I said, it's definitely going to be two ways, where it's one part of it is doing dope shit that kind of leverages the CCO aspect of MFers so that more people find out about it, more people get aware about it, just kind of, traditional brand building or whatever you want to call it for the MFers, right? But then also the other way around, where we'll incorporate utility into the MFers back into what we're doing as well. So there'll be stuff like that, basically. So both ways.
Okay, nice. That was enough. That was sufficient alpha for me. I'll lay off.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of my favorite things about Studio TBD, well, it's two things. One is that you guys don't care at all about like the viral marketing bullcrap hype stuff, right? You guys are, that to me is like OG AF behavior. The second thing is your guys' take on making cannabis safe again, and like the combination and how you guys sort of use CBD and THC and like the ratios. Could you talk a little bit about that and how that makes your product, differentiated on the market?
Yeah, for sure. So, um, our thesis around cannabis is that, first of all, just kind of, go back a little bit. Um, when we started making gummies or we started making edibles, they weren't even gummies, right? So we were looking at it like, okay, there is a cannabis market. We always joke about that, like we're in the Napster era of cannabis, which is basically that, 95% of all cannabis that's sold is sold illegally right now, in the US or in the world too, right? It's like that's the predominant market is still illegal. And even in a place like California, I guess like half the market is still illegal, right? And so we're really in the early stages of cannabis, and the new form factors that have come to market. To us, it was like there's a lot of culture and kind of embeddedness that already exists in traditional cannabis around the strains, around the OGs that are involved, the growers, the this or that. There are incumbents, there is culture around that, right? So when the new form factor came out around gummies, it was interesting because it was really an opportunity to kind of reimagine cannabis, to use a word, right? To like, okay, rethink cannabis, get cannabis to a larger audience, a lot of people that weren't necessarily gonna smoke, or they don't roll up or whatever, right? So that was one thing, first of all. And then obviously we saw and knew that beverages were something that was going to happen, that was something that was possible. And for us, we felt like, okay, between gummies and edible, or gummies and drinks, that really has a lot of mainstream potential. Like, is it going to be bigger than smoked flower and stuff like that? I have no idea. It's not really interesting if it's not. It's just that it's obvious that the opportunity exists for mainstream consumption within these form factors that people already use, right? And nowadays, even if you look at it, Gatorade just came out with a gummy. And a lot of companies are coming out with gummies that have nothing to do with cannabis, just because the gummy market has become so big and prominent because of cannabis to a large extent, right? So I think that cannabis is already kind of reshaping a lot of things. Alcohol is, if it's not on the decline, it's kind of flatlining, where everything that's happening within alcohol is kind of just moving things towards more premium. I don't think people are going to stop drinking in any way, shape, or form, but I do think that people like alternatives or add-ons, or just making their repertoire bigger. And then beverages and edibles are just so great. The beverages are obviously a social product. You can do it indoors while you're eating, while you're barbecuing, this or that. And then the edibles are great because they're discreet and you can bring them on the plane, or you can bring them to the movie theater or whatever, right? So that's kind of like the first layer of it. Then we started exploring all the different cannabinoids, and um, it was when we started making edibles back in 2017, there was no one doing ratios. Like, it was straight THC. People didn't even know really how much THC it was. And, I saw the first couple of times milligrams attached to a edible. It was like 100 milligrams, but like, was it really 100 milligrams? There's a lot that goes into the process of actually making edible, that you can test it at a high level, but then the body doesn't absorb it at that level anyway. So there's a lot that goes into like how bioavailable a product is as well. And ratio products didn't even exist. So we started experimenting with CBD and THC ratios because in the medical field, there was a lot of success with that, where they had seen like, okay, this specific ratio was better for this, or they used it with different patients for different things, yada, yada. So that was kind of like intriguing. We did a lot of sampling. So anecdotally, we would make different ratios and we would just hand them out to a lot of different people, and we would see kind of like what the reaction was, right? And within the group that really liked alcohol, wasn't really consuming that much cannabis, or they were in the group where they had consumed cannabis, like maybe in high school or college, but then they had gotten a career or they gotten a family, and and then kind of like they hadn't consumed cannabis for a while, right? So there was a couple of things going on there. And what we found out was that these people really liked these ratio edibles. People swore by it. They were like, this is a better experience, yada, yada. There was, there's a lot of now coming out medical evidence for it. It helps with a lot of the side effects that people usually complain about. That could be drowsiness or anxiety or, even to the extreme psychosis for some people, right? If you consume too much THC. But then also there's a lot of anecdotal evidence. So we were sampling a lot and we were like, okay, like this is definitely something that people enjoy more. And even people that love cannabis and consume cannabis for a long time were also telling us, you know what, like your gummies are really amazing. Like I feel different. It's perfect for this certain thing. Or, what I mean? Like heavy stoners, they'll, pop our gummies in the morning or like they'll, what I mean? There'll be something like that. Like it's perfect when I have to work, right? They can't get stoned at work, but they love the edibles for that. So from our standpoint, then we were like, okay, we think that mainstream premium cannabis is going to be around the infused products, and it's going to be around different combination of cannabinoids. Because we started seeing also that CBN came to market, THCV, CBG, CBC, and then from the research, there's probably like a couple of hundred cannabinoids that are active that we're just finding out about slowly but surely. So for us, it was like, okay, the combination of putting these different cannabinoids together, that's definitely going to be a big factor of doing kind of like either performance brand or functional brand or whatever, right? Like this is what people are going to be doing. And for us, it was the main two ones are THC and CBD. So let's make a brand about the ratios, and that's where TBD came from. Was THC plus CBD is TBD. And then we have a few different ratios that we're going to come out with. The two that have already come out is the 425, which 425 I think is like the perfect anti-anxiety product where it's never going to get you too high, but it will definitely take the edge off it right away. And it's like females absolutely love that product. And then we have the 1020, which is it's a stronger product, but it's still a ratio product as well. And then we have other ratios and stuff that we're going to come out with. So that's our viewpoint of it, and we think that the market is already kind of shaping out in that way a little bit. But yeah, that's our thesis and our view.
I love that idea because and just all the theses that you're kind of combining to like build the business and the strategy. And it's funny because I always joke with friends that like just from like when I was in high school to like now, like weed has gotten so fucking strong. I'm like, holy shit, like is it like what the fuck happened? Like, and we always joke like, why don't
it's
they
true.
just make like, yeah, I'm like, why don't they make like 70s weed? It's like, more like mild, like wine, now it's like you get fucking blasted. It's like so fucking potent. But I actually,
that's a real thing.
Yeah, I know. I feel it. Like I'm like, they get too good at growing it. They have the hydroponics, they create them short. They're like hella crystallized. Breezy, what's your, what ratio do you prefer? And Benchmarc, I'm curious too. What's your preferred ratio? If you have one, if you tried both of them, Breezy.
Dude, so I have a funny story about this. I actually ordered these like the first time, and I ordered both the 425 and the 1020 because I wanted to try and like compare. So the first time I had it was actually at NFT NYC, the MFR event. Benchmarc was kind enough to like give them out, and I tried it like on the flight home, and that's when I was like, and I think those were the 425s that you gave out, and I think
yes.
I ate like the whole thing because I was like, yeah, I need this whole thing. Like, I'm a pretty big dude. Okay. Like that's also part of that. And so I was like, I need to eat this whole thing. So, and I felt great. I was like, this is awesome. And like full disclosure, I've had very little success, with other products in the past. All have tried and all have been consumed in legal jurisdictions, by the way. And so when I tried yours, I honestly had low expectations. I was like, I don't have much success. And then I'm sitting on the plane and I was just like buzzing and I was like, whoa, like, I was like, these things are awesome. But the funny story that I have is that I bought the 2-packs, right? These were the full purchase ones. They arrived, again, in legal jurisdictions. And I consumed on accident, like the entire, like, or half of the 1020s, right? I tried to eat. I thought I was eating the 425s. I ate like half the 1020s. Not a good, like, dude, we're talking 12, 15 hours of just a ruined, like my whole day was just like
Wow.
gone. But that's a
Oh,
testament to
wow.
how great they are. You definitely need to make. So my suggestion is make the packages different colors for dumbasses like me, because I definitely did not
Right, for
read the
sure.
fucking thing. But it was a great experience.
Yeah.
I don't know, preference. I'm not sure. My buddy's dad takes them. He's like this 65-year-old guy. We showed him to my buddy's dad, and he loves them. The dude hadn't smoked at all since like the 60s, and then like
Wow.
we gave him not the 60s, but you get the point. And then we gave him these, and he was like so nervous to try them because they were like larger than like a dose of something else he had tried, but he cuts them in half. Right. So, and he does the 1020s. Yeah. And he cuts them in half, and he loves them. He swears by them.
Yeah.
So I think those are like the winners for most people. But I would agree that I've found females also like the 425s. So that was interesting that you said that.
The 425 is really my go-to. I love the 425. I think it's great. 1020 is also great for different occasions, I guess. You know what I mean? It's funny too, because like the beverages, like you guys haven't tried the beverages, but the beverages are a little bit different too. They hit you quicker, they go out your system quicker. So like with the beverages, it's pretty dope because like the 425 is like so mild in the sense that it comes on right away. You can obviously gauge it pretty well too, because it hits you quick, right? So if you have half, within 10 minutes you start feeling it, and you can know if you take less or you keep on going or whatever, right? So it really has that effect. And then 2 hours later, it'll be more or less like it never happened, which to me is like magic, right? Like you could actually have one of those for lunch or during the day, and then 2 hours later you can go to the gym if you want to, and you'll be fine.
That's awesome. I can't wait to try these. I'm going to order some right now because it's so true. It's like if I get like high in the middle of the day, and then it's just like, that's it for the day, right? I'm just going to be watching Netflix for the rest of the day. So I'm going to order some of the gummies and the drink and the beverage, because that sounds fucking awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And you know how it is with alcohol too. A lot of people have been telling us, especially, they have young kids and stuff like that. They don't want to drink in front of their kids, or if they do, then it starts getting sloppy. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's just a great product like that. And everybody has the same experience that you just mentioned, that, they smoked earlier in their life, or they smoked in college or whatever. And then they try smoking again, and they get sent out of space, and they're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what is up with this weed? Like, what is up with the weed? Right. And it's true statistically, they've done these police reports, right, where they look over time to the weed that they confiscate, and weed is seriously up like 500 or 600% since the 70s. So it's just a straight line, right? It's gone from basically single digit THC to now, 35-40%. So it's and it's, what, to be like that, it's not even really that great for you either, right? That's
Yeah, I was about to say, I think in one of the blog posts that you guys put out, you mentioned that we don't really have any data around the effects of like the exposure to these high THC levels, right? Or this potent of THC.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's pretty,
I mean, that
concerning.
is true. And yeah, and it is. Yeah, I think so too, because like from our standpoint, if millions and millions and more people are going to start, consuming cannabis, it's like, would you want your kids to fucking smoke 40% weed when they're 17 years old? Like, I'm not that sure that would be a great thing. You know what I mean? So, because it causes inflammation, and it's definitely, can affect learning and memory and stuff like that. So, it's it's going to be a real problem. I think that problem hasn't happened yet in cannabis. Like, that's going to happen, where you're going to start seeing backlashes of strong cannabis, people consuming too much cannabis, and what really, before we don't really have like any idea about what the problems are. We just have like anecdotal info, but the anecdotal info is so off, because since it's illegal, like, you don't know what other things people are consuming, or like it becomes very like the groups of people are a certain group of people, right? So it might be more of that than it has to do with anything else, right? So we don't know.
No, yeah, that's a good point. So, like even here in Texas where I live part of the time, like cannabis isn't it's like decriminalized in some places, in some like Harris County, Travis County, which are big places
Mm-hmm.
like Houston, Austin. And so like, you can go into like a smoke shop or a gas station or something, and you can find like the Delta 8s, the Delta 9s, the THC, the different cannabinoid products and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they like, to a consumer who doesn't know anything about cannabis, like it's all the same. You know what I mean? Like it just like they're gonna ask the guy behind the counter, at least in my experience, like, "Hey, what do you recommend?" And that guy's just gonna point to something, and they're gonna buy that. So from your
Yeah.
perspective, like how do you make sure that you're who either the person behind the counter recommends, or that your product stands out to these people? Is it really just all branding, or I just, how do you communicate that? Because it's not like beer where people have like this, oh, this tastes different, you know what I mean? Or they have like this
Mm-hmm.
nostalgia connection to beer. My dad still drinks Rolling Rock because that's what he had in
Nice.
college, kind of thing, right? And so,
Yeah.
but like cannabis, yeah, like I walk into a store and there's like a wall of them, and they're all, the guy says behind the counter, he's like, these are all going to work, kind of thing, right? But your product is
right.
different. It's so different. Your product is like, I think your product is obviously has an audience, like a more mature audience might walk in and want your product over some sketchy thing that promises to blast them to the moon. So, how do you, wrangle with that problem?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it's one of those things that a lot of cannabis kind of companies talk about, and there's a lot of discussions going on about it. I would say that it's a few things, right? First of all, that's where the concept comes in too. Like it has to be a very simple concept that people can understand and that people can re-communicate. So if people are asking for something, for us it was always like, for instance, people were asking like, well, I like the gummies that have both CBD and THC, for instance. Like that was a question that people used to say, and that's becoming a thing that people talk about, right? So for us, it was like, okay, that's great because then the store, the people that work in the store or whatever, they can say, oh, you like that? Well, there's a brand actually that is a ratio brand, and the name is the ratio, right? So like it's part of the one thing of it is obviously concept, but then also packaging is really important. So like certain people, like you said, more, that's something that people have said a lot too. They call us kind of like adult weed, right? So the packaging looks established, it's simple, it's informative in the ways that you want it to be informative. It's not like a big thing about like who we are, but it's about, that we have that chart on, for instance, which everybody asks about, like, when am I going to get high? When am I going to peak? When is it over? Right. So it's very informative. It looks established. Product looks kind of, looks like it's for a mature audience compared to a lot of these other products that, are pretty fucking crazy. Right. So that's that. But then also, I would say maybe even the most important step, and that's why we've chosen the approach with having our own in-house sales teams and kind of growing it a little bit slower on the retail front, but doing everything ourselves, is that you really have to connect with the retailer. So you have to be there a lot. You have to, establish and develop a relationship with the retailers, with the people that actually work in the store, to train them, on what your product is, why it's different. This now, if people ask this, you should say this, yada yada yada. And you really have to get them on your side, right? You have to embrace it and become that, so that they become an extended part of the team. And that's also why we love the concept of having a token, because for us, that can also be something where we create this kind of node network of like, listen, if you're working in the store and you love our product and you're pitching our product and you're driving sales for us, we can whitelist you a token. That's not a
Yeah.
problem because we see what you're doing for us, right? And I think that everybody would be super cool with that, right? And that's also an amazing opportunity that no one has done, because we've been talking a little bit about the utility aspect, but the next aspect is also driving distribution through the token. Like you could go viral in real life with the token.
Right. Right. So that's that went exactly where I hoped it went. So how many of your like shops or vendors, if you will, merchants, if you will, how many of them approach you about acquiring the token, or say like, hey, we bought this token last night?
It hasn't happened a lot yet, for a couple of reasons. And it has to do with that we're very, very product focused, and there are things that almost need to happen first before for that to happen, right? So I would say, first of all, these relationships are kind of new. They're only a couple of months old in a lot of cases. We really focus on helping them drive the sales of the product, what we can do to help them drive the sales of the product. But in any case where we are developing relationships, that would kind of be the next step. But what I would say instead, what has happened, and which is kind of the precursor to that, is that we had someone that liked the product, bought the token, and now actually does sales for us. That's went through that entire loop. So that was pretty cool thing to happen. And that kind of like enforced our thesis a little bit around, how that can happen at scale, right? And we think that that will happen at scale when we get more active.
So you're expecting like people to acquire your tokens and then they basically work for you, right? I mean, indirectly, they're working for themselves, but they work for you kind of. And now they're shopping these tokens around to smoke shops and stuff like that. That's kind of your vision, like a decentralized sales team, sort of.
Yeah, well, I think like, what could happen is that it could just kind of accelerate the process, right? It could align the incentives more. It could get people that extra reason to push a little bit harder. There is something that you can hold on to that is connected to the company. It's not equity, but it's something different. And we've established a kind of floor value for it via the discount, right? And then we'll kind of see how it plays out. We're not 100% sure exactly how it's going to play out, but we've seen it happen in small little pockets. So it does make sense. And I think it's one of those things where we have done, like zero marketing, right? So everything is very word of mouth, very grassroots. But, coming now into the summer, there will be more kind of activations from our standpoint, and will be more outwardly facing toward consumer online and offline as well.
Got it. No, that's cool. Yeah, I get it. And like me and my buddy were toying with that. Like, should we buy a bunch of these tokens and try to be the like distributors of these discounts and stuff? So it's interesting that obviously it makes sense that you guys have gone down that rabbit hole.
I would say that I definitely recommend everybody to go follow us on Twitter, because there will be a lot of stuff that's going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks. And if you follow us, that's going to be the way to hear about it. And we're going to be doing some stuff with the MFers and some other stuff as well. So yeah, that's all I would say about that. And, we would love to maybe, do like kind of like a part 2 of this in a few weeks or so, and we can chat more about those things that are happening at the time that they're happening.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And we definitely will have all of the relevant links for bios, the Studio TBD e-commerce website, the Studio TBD token, mint page. Everything will be in the descriptions of these videos, so everybody can check those out really, really easily. And yeah, we'd love to have you back, man. There's so many gems in here, so many like good nuggets, and like I could tell there's a lot of experience and business knowledge behind this MFer of yours. And so I'm excited to hopefully revisit as you guys kind of unravel your roadmap here and drop some more knowledge and alpha to the market. And yeah, man, congratulations. This is really, really fun.
No, it was super fun chatting with you guys. And yeah, we have a lot of stuff in the pipeline that we can come back and talk about. It's going to be very, very visual as it's unfolding. And I think that's going to be the perfect time.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, man.
Thank you so much, Benchmarc. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Super fun.
No problem, man. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
Let's do it, guys. All right. Peace out.
All right.
Cheers.
Peace.